And now it appears we'll finally get to see someplace new. Let's get started. Chapter 3 Webster Groves. The apartment was small, cramped, mean. It had not been lived in. There were no human touches, no pictures of relatives, no flowers or personalized decorations. It was very clean, but the flooring looked worn, no carpets, and the door handles looked dull from use. A silly-looking robot stood against one wall. This room was perhaps 3 meters by 5, and it had a chair and a small couch that might seat 2, 3 if they didn't mind contact. There was a curious blank space against one wall, a control panel. One was near one closed door. An open door led to what seemed to be a bedroom. A third door was closed and smaller than the others. In the bedroom, Derek saw that when he took a step was another closed door. It was side by side with the closed door in this room, and he judged that they were both closets. Also in that wall, in both rooms, were drawer pulls, drawers built into the wall. A faint mechanical hum permeated the apartment, and that was it. "Just 2 rooms," he said in disbelief. "No bathroom," said Ariel. "No, and no kitchen or dining room." They looked at each other. The only thing Derek could think of was a prison, but that wasn't right. There'd be a bathroom at least, and this was too small and sterile for a prison anyway. "I wonder if that robot is functional," said Ariel, frowning at it. It didn't look functional. It had a rigid, silly grin on the plastic face, unlike any robot Derek had seen or heard of. Now that he looked at it critically, its joints and the associated drive mechanisms looked large and clumsy. His training in robotics had dealt primarily with the brains, but the bodies, too, had been covered. It seemed to be looking at them, but it hadn't moved, of course. "Robot, are you functional?" Derek asked. "Yes, master," it said obsequiently, not moving, that fastidious grin never altering. Robots should not have phony human faces, Derek thought in irritation. One kept wanting to respond, but there was no emotion there to respond to. "What is your name?" "My name is our David, master." Ariel looked questioningly at him. Derek shook his head. Robots often had human names, if they attended to humans. Ariel had once told him that as a child she had named her nurse robot Guggles, though her parents had named the robot Catherine. Nowhere, though, had he heard of a robot with a prefix to its name. "Our David?" Or had he heard— "Our David, what planet is this?" Ariel asked. "This is Earth, Miss Avery," the robot said respectfully. Startled, staggered, in fact, they looked at each other. Of course, the rooms were so small, so cramped and mean, because Earth was immensely overpopulated. It had more people than all 50 spacer worlds put together. The robot was crude because Earthmen were backward in robotics, and in fact had a strong prejudice against them. As strong as their prejudice against spacers. "We might have been better off back in Robot City," Derek said. "Maybe we can get to civilization from here," Ariel said. "Good thinking. Our David, is it possible to take a ship from Earth to the spacer worlds?" "Yes, Mr. Avery. Ships leave Earth at least weekly, and often more frequently." Mr. Avery, and he had called Ariel Miss Avery. They glanced at each other and with one accord decided not to mention it. It seemed obvious to Derek that this robot was accustomed to seeing Dr. Avery come and go in the instantaneous fashion possible only to key-wielders. It had accepted that Avery could come and go in such a fashion. Seeing them arrive in the same way, it came to the logical but wrong conclusion that they were Averys, though they were not, obviously not, Dr. Avery. "The first thing to do, then, is to get to the spaceport," Derek said. "Does that door lead to the outside?" "One moment, Mr. Avery, if you please. It would not be wise for you to venture forth without preparation." "What sort of preparation?" Derek asked. The robot was right. This was Earth. "First you'll need a complete prophylactic regimen against the diseases of Earth. There are many and varied, and you have no natural immunity." Frost, that was so. They looked at each other in alarm. "However, the problem is not as great as most spacers believe." The robot stirred, opened a drawer in the wall, and produced hypoguns, vials, pills. Grimacing, but needing no urging, they submitted themselves to their use. "Take the pills when next you drink. If at any time you have any physical sensations of illness, you must notify me at once. It will be necessary to diagnose you immediately for treatment." Derek and Ariel nodded solemnly, more than a little nervous at the thought of earthly diseases. "You will also need identification, ration slips, and tags, and money," said R. David decisively when that was done. Moving clumsily, he had opened the door to the closet in the sitting room. It was jammed with things, from a book viewer and boxes of records to compact duplication devices. Derek recognized these as spacer-made, and surmised that it would be no great feat to duplicate earthly ID symbols. In this he was correct. R. David lowered the blank thing in the wall, a folding table, and spent an hour or so producing numerous bits of plastic and metal bearing on their pictures, long numbers, various obscure statements about them, and of course a complete ID workup, including fingerprints, footprints, retinal scans, corneal images, ear pictures, and blood analysis. "Dr. Avery procured comparatively large sums of earthly money when he first landed," R. David explained. "He traded rare metals for it. Of course, money as such is of little value of Earth, as it can only be used to purchase non-essentials such as book recordings. Food, housing, clothing, and so on are rationed." "Frost," said Ariel nervously. "I wouldn't want some poor earther to starve because I got his rations." "There is no danger of that, Miss Avery. There is ample margin. It does no harm to anyone to provide you with earthly ID, as Dr. Avery has more than paid for the consumption of Earth's scarce resources with his rare metals. Ration items are available in amounts and quantities controlled by the individual's rating." "Rating?" "One's position in earthly society. I understand that things are not greatly different in any human society, but on Earth such things have been formalized to a much higher degree." "It's true that in spacer worlds the most important people usually get the best of what's going," said Ariel wryly. "Maybe Earth is actually more honest in admitting this. What kind of government does Earth have? Is it a democratic, aristocratic, or what? Do the higher ratings run everything?" "In answer to your last question, yes, to a degree. Earth is a democratic syndicalism, with elections to Parliament ranging from the location in the lower house and from the industry to the upper house, or Senate. Elections are democratic in those areas, but most of the administration is by appointed officials, these being people who have passed certain tests and worked their way up from less important offices. Syndicalism means that the industry, primarily the feeding, housing, and clothing of the population, dominates the government." "I can see how that would be necessary," said Derek, watching the robot's big, clumsy hands proceed delicately at their task. "How many ratings are there, and what's the highest?" "Currently there are 21 ratings. The rating A is usually considered the highest. It is rarely bestowed. Only 10 million humans are in this rating category." 1 out of 10, Derek thought automatically. Then he caught himself. No. On Aurora or most baser worlds, 10 million would be 10% of the populace, but Earth had. "What's the population of Earth, R. David?" Ariel asked, having paralleled Derek's thoughts. 8 billion, Miss Avery." 8 billion! They looked at each other. The population of 80 spatial worlds, and there were only 50. "Who is in the A rating? Government officials?" "No. This rating is largely reserved for entrepreneurs who solve large problems, for inventors, heroic spacemen, and other adventurers. It may be conferred by popular acclaim, as in the case of certain beloved entertainers. Recipients of the A rating have many privileges, among them the right to adorn their doors with laurel." "A high honor, like the Medal of Aurora," Derek nodded. "The details. What was laurel? It didn't matter." "What's the next lowest rating?" "B rating is reserved for planetary and continental government officials, both elected and appointed. C refers to city officials. D is for industry officials. From there it becomes complex and not obvious. There are 15 steps in each rating, the lowest being step 1. "So what rate and step are you preparing for us?" "I am preparing identification for T ratings, as I did for Dr. Avery. As I assume you will wish to remain anonymous as spacers, it will certainly facilitate your investigation of earthly society if you pass unremarked, and the T rating is the best for that purpose." "What kinds of people are normally assigned to T ratings?" Ariel asked. "The T stands for transient. Any persons whose duties require him or her to travel may be assigned this rating, unless the rating itself allows of that eventuality, as do B ratings and many A ratings. Salesmen, for instance, may be rated D or T, but usually T, as D is assigned to administrative duties." "In your cases," R. David continued, "I had considered assigning you S ratings, students, but I judged it not advisable, as students have certain restrictions, and I would be forced to specify a school." As interesting as this all was, Derek found the hour it took to prepare the ID dragging. The tiny roomed apartment with only 2 rooms was a prison more confining than any he had viewed in historical novels. Even the dungeons of the ancient times on earth seemed larger. The varying mechanical drone seemed to grow louder and louder until it was forced to speak, whereupon it faded at once to its actual low level. It was the sound, he thought in awe, of the city, a sound no earthman could avoid, from birth to death, for they never went outside their cities. Finally the ID was completed, and R. David explained the uses of various pieces. "This is your ration tag for food. Your home kitchen is 9G. Personnels are also assigned, but you may use any you see. Derek, take care not to speak to or look at anyone in personnel. That is a strong taboo for men on Earth. Ariel, women have no such taboo. You may speak in personal. Your ratings do not grant you stall privileges. You must supply your own combs, brushes, and shaving equipment." R. David droned on, provided them with a map of the local area. There was an attempt to put everything on the same level, they learned. Their quarters were low status, and so they had to go up or down to personals and commissionary. At length the robot gave them hats and let them go, obviously worried. Ariel opened the door and stepped out, Derek following. The same oyster white walls as the interior, they might have been in a very cheap hotel, and in fact Derek surmised they were. A youth with long, elaborately coiffed hair and gaudy, cheap clothes gave him a sullen look from down the corridor as he entered an apartment. An older woman, heavy and squarish and short, passed them, carrying an open bottle and exhaling the odor of mousy beer. She did not so much as look at them as not see them. Turning to the right, Derek led them toward a gleam of brighter light. Behind them 2 men exited from an apartment, talking casually together about a sporting event, oddly called boxing. Moments later, Derek and Ariel were at the junction. A wider, busier corridor crossed theirs at right angles. Ariel pointed out the sign that told them theirs was sub-corridor 16. They had just entered corridor M. Turning left, they followed a small crowd, which quickly resolved itself into an accidental grouping. There must have been 50 people in view at any given moment, Derek estimated, and was slightly staggered. Abruptly on the right, the wall became transparent, and they looked into an open space in which children raced about and bounced balls. A playground. The inside of the wall had crude bits of childish art affixed to it. Posters boasted of obscure triumphs, and recitations were advertised. It was strange, yet Derek found it familiar. Something in his forgotten past he had played in such a playground, though nothing specific came through. One thing, though, he missed, the gleam of attentive robots along the wall and amid the yelling mobs. Corridor M terminated at a large circular junction. In the angles, 4 escalator strips spiraled, 2 up and 2 down. Beyond, according to the signs, was another subsection. Theirs was subsection G. Perhaps 100 men and women and children were visible, Derek thought. He and Ariel, awed, slowed their pace and drifted to one side of the center of the junction, avoiding both the mouths of the corridors and the escalators. 100, not the same 100. Moment by moment people filtered in and filtered out, up or down, away along the corridors or in from either direction. Derek supposed wildly that 10 minutes a person might see 500 people, Frost, maybe 1,000. And now that the playground had alerted him, he noted that none of them were robots. There were small tables with uncomfortable looking benches before them, at which people sat. some playing chess. Other benches without tables, equally uncomfortable in appearance, harbored other people. Not far from them an old fellow like a wrinkled apple smiled cherubically at everything he saw. Beside him on the bench was an uncapped bottle wrapped in brown paper up to the neck. Others who sat about were also old. Some played chess or other board games at the tables, some snacked on various foodstuffs. The walls under the escalators had identifying marks high up, but lower down there were large boards with papers affixed to them, announcing various events. Below that still were wide strips running from escalator to corridor mouth, on which crude, vigorous murals had been painted. At one corner an earnest group of youths, younger than Ariel or Derek, were touching the mural lightly with flat applique boards, painting a new mural over the old. Watching them was a young woman all in blue. She looked short, square, sturdy, and wore an odd cap with a bill of translucent blue that threw a blue shadow over her face. Above the bill was a golden medal. She turned, and they saw that she had the label C3 on her upper left chest, and a tool of some sort dangling from her left side. It was half a meter long and had a sturdy grip. C ratings were city functionaries, Derek remembered. Then he realized that the tool was a neuronic whip. No, it was far too big and heavy. The neuronic whip might be in that buttoned shirt pouch in front. The tool had to be a club. A policewoman. Her eye took them in, paused, went on, and she crossed to speak to one of the old parties at a table. Derek stared in fascination. He had never, to his knowledge, laid eyes on one whose duty was to apply force to other human beings. "Standing here as we are, we stand out. She's probably trained to notice people who act oddly," Ariel said in a low voice. Derek agreed wordlessly, started toward the down escalator, reflecting that no one could understand them from a little distance if they spoke normally, so great was the noise of people and the murmur of escalators. Each escalator flattened out when it met the floor, and there was a 3-meter strip of level surface. Ahead of them, Earthmen strode forward and stepped on without breaking stride, then turned about to face their direction of travel. Derek and Ariel tried to imitate that confident stride. At least the example taught them to enter against the direction of travel, a thing Derek wouldn't have guessed. They stepped with only a slight flexing of the legs and a quick shuffle to gain balance. They turned around and looked down, just as the strip dived down behind the wall. The escalator, they saw, was not actually a stairway, as they had expected. It was a flat moving ramp. Overhead was a sloping ceiling from which came the muted rumble of drives. One of the other strips, Derek supposed, probably an up strip. The down escalator did a complete half-turn clockwise, then the wall to their right opened, and they were on the other side of the junction at the next level down. One more half-circle, another junction, and there came a full circle with no exit, and they were at the bottom. The murmur became thunderous. The escalator dived into a slit in the floor, and Derek presumed ran underground for a few meters, only to reverse itself and climb backward out of the floor and up. There were only 2 strips, not 4, each going both up and down simultaneously. 24 people got off below them, and as they got off 50 more followed them, dispersing briskly in all directions, fighting through hundreds of people, going 8 different ways. The junction was 4 times as busy as the one they'd seen above. Derek and Ariel tried not to gape. Light and noise came through the arches that replaced the corridor mouths above, and they saw people whirring past. If before they'd seen hundreds, now they saw thousands. Derek swallowed a small knot of fear. So many people! He got the distinct impression he'd never seen that many people together before. He realized he was making quick calculations of how much air they were using, and more importantly, how much was left for him. No, he thought, if there's enough for 8 billion people, there's enough for me. To the right and to the left, moving strips hurtled past, faster and higher as they got further away from the junction. Higher overhead were glowing, crawling signs like worms of light, the largest saying Webster Groves. Before and behind them, the other 2 arches opened on the non-moving space between the strips. It was dotted with kiosks, some being communication booths, some being the head strips that came up from below. Far away down the concourse was another wide tube coming down from the ceiling of its 4 escalators. Behind, at the limits of sight, was another. They drifted out, read the signs, awed. People swarmed about them. The noise was continuous, and not so loud as seemed. The air was warm and humid and thick with the odor of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. So this is Earth. That is the end of this chapter. You can definitely tell this was written a while ago, since it considers 8 billion people to basically destroy the world, and right now we're at 7.5 billion, and there's still more space than just an apartment of 2 rooms for people. Although if everyone moved into cities, that would definitely change. Anyway, hope you enjoyed. And yeah, bye!